When things became more important than people and principles were thrown out of the window and could be bought, we became materialistic, Randall. I mean, let's face it now. When you could buy a person, I mean, when you could buy a decision, when you could buy anything that you want in this society and you don't have to earn it and nobody cares how you got it. I mean, and when just because you have things, you are something, then you've lost all concept of civilization. On a classical scale, you must remember now the kind of civilization that I think I was headed towards and the country was headed towards when I was in my teens and early 20s in the 60s and 70s was a civilization that was built on great ideas, big ideas, good ideas, and the Holy Bible.
Let's now listen to this tribute by Mr. Rupert Roberts, a longtime friend of Sir Charles Carter and owner of SuperValue food stores.
Eddie informed me about 2 weeks ago that his father was not doing very well. So it was no surprise to me on Sunday when Eddie called and said he wanted to inform me from the family, instead of seeing it on the news, that his father had passed. Charles was a true friend and a business associate for over 50 years. He was a kind, friendly, loyal, intelligent, honest person, easy to communicate with. In the food industry, it's price and service with weekly advertising. And in the old days, the announcer did the specials, and Charles Carter was that announcer. It's another holiday weekend at SuperValue. The bright golden supermarkets, peas and rice, macaroni and cheese, chicken leg quarters, and the public rolled in. The customers rolled in. He was the voice of SuperValue. Over the 50 years, and until recently, his son Eddie became that voice. That's how we became acquainted and formed a friendship and business relationship. Charles' two sons were trained to walk in his footsteps and made him proud of their early achievements. Charles was a friendly person, friendly to everybody. We paralleled each other's careers and gave each other advice along the way. Someone asked my wife, "Did you know Charles Carter?" She said, "He's in my kitchen every night at 7 p.m. At times he was really in our kitchen and bragged about my wife being such a good chef. I never did tell him that I do the steaks. I supported Charles when he entered politics. While he was Minister of Foreign Affairs, one of my relatives had a problem in the U.S. Navy. Charles gave me a letter in Old English certifying that he was a Bahamian citizen and would be welcome back to the Bahamas when released from the Navy. The letter worked like a charm. Charles was Minister of Health when we had a serious outbreak of conch poisoning like we have now. So he became known as conch minister to his friends. Charles' biggest political contribution was his housing project, providing housing for several hundred of his constituents. His main accomplishment became his downfall. In the next election, he lost by those 200 votes. When people get a stake in life, they change their politics. Charles interviewed me about Bahamians making a contribution to their country. After a half an hour conversation, I reminded Charles that I had another appointment. He reached over, turned off the recorder, and said, "That finishes that." He had been recording the whole time. I hope that Charles left his Bahamian music to his sons, Eddie and Mark. His station is known for the Bahamian music. Charles was dedicated to the Bahamas and always promoted Bahamian artists and Bahamian music. Charles was from a music family dating back to his father's store, Cody's Record Shop on Bay Street. My condolences to Lady Carter, Mark, Eddie, and the rest of the family. Sir Charles will be well remembered and will be missed very much.
We now listen to this tribute by the former Prime Minister of the Bahamas, Mr. Perry Christie.
I was deeply saddened to hear and learn of the death of my very good friend, Charles Carter. Without any doubt whatsoever, the Commonwealth of the Bahamas is much the poorer by his loss and departure from this earth. He was an incredible cultural force in our country. I don't know if history can properly record the full measure and meaning of Charles Carter's contribution to what I regarded as the cultural renaissance of our country, the reawakening culturally of our country. And it was a process that he played an extraordinary role in. As we were a colony, Charles Carter began a radio program, Young Bahamians, where he searched out talent. He inspired and encouraged talented young Bahamians. And much to his credit, in an incredible fashion, many of these men and women who he helped to promote became his friends in an enduring relationship for a lifetime. For example, long after Ronnie Butler had reached the summit of performances worldwide in our country, was recognized as one of the greats of our country, and he began towards retirement, Charles Carter remained his friend. And it was true of Carter, even when you were no longer a performer or no longer a regular performer, Charles Carter remained your friend. And he demonstrated that in so many different ways. I remember once I was campaigning in my constituency, and I walked into a home, a very modest home, with one man living in it, and his name was Joseph Spence. I knew nothing other than he was a voter in Centerville, living next to where Aquinas was being built in Culmersville. Months later, Charles Carter asked me if I knew Joseph Spence. And I had to search in my memory to recall that it was a voter by that name who I had encouraged to support me in 1977. It turned out that Carter gave me an education in who Joseph Spence was. A virtuoso with the guitar, followed by people not just in the Bahamas, but even in Europe and the United States of America. This, again, was an extraordinary indicator to me that Carter, with his radio shows, was sort of creating images and telling stories and trying to create for people who did not have television at the time an image and an understanding of who he was talking about, who he was promoting, and he allowed their music and their performances to be all the more enriching. And so, to a great extent, this involvement with the genius of a radio show called Young Bahamians was in fact one of the major bulwarks in the cultural renaissance of our country. Carter understood, more so than most people, that we were an island nation where we were separated by expanses of water, and we needed something to help us reach an understanding we were all the same people. And even before independence, where it had to be symbolic that we were one, Carter and his show was trying to unite Bahamians behind the evolution of a stronger cultural presence in our country, knowing that the music and the songs and the storytelling would in fact make people wherever they are and were in the Bahamas feel that this was their country, and they had any sense of whether it was Blind Blake, whether it was George Simonette, whether it was Ronnie Butler, whether it was Ezra Hepburn. Carter made you feel a part of who they were, and their performances became a part of your own personal feeling of we are okay in the Bahamas. So that's what culture is about. The food we eat, the stories we tell, what we write, it's all about us and who we are. And so this whole evolution leading into independence as to who we are, what would be our cultural identity, what would be linking us together and making us feel whole. This thing that called the Bahamas, when it was created, what makes us Bahamian? A part and parcel of Charles Carter's historic work was being able to really promote hundreds of Bahamian artists towards this goal of people having a feel that we all belong to the same country, the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. So when one tries to measure that performance of his cultural influence in our country, it's enormous. I call it a tour de force, where he just did so much for so many in being able to move us along the road in the right way. And I don't know of any radio personality, television personality, or even person who did more for the cultural reawakening, the cultural renaissance, the cultural strengthening of our country than Charles Carter. I was speaking with his brother and I said, listen, how did this begin? Why would some young Bahamian develop into a Charles Carter? And he says that in 1946 his father started selling records. The sons had to work in the record shop, and Carter was exposed not only to records, Bahamian records such as they existed at the time, but Bahamian artists such as they existed at the time, and developed therefore this great feel for it. Well, what has happened as a result of this with respect to culture in particular? This is a subject that we must do more to strengthen. When I was Prime Minister, I asked P.J. Patterson, who was Prime Minister, retired Prime Minister of Jamaica, who had long and strong arguments about the need for governments of the region to do more in promoting culture. He said that from an economic point of view, culture was a multi-billion-dollar business, and we in the region was not taking proper advantage of it. So when I was the chair of CARICOM, I asked him to do a paper for me. And he prepared a paper, and a part of that paper showed that its culture was so important to Jamaica that 3 artists in Jamaica earn more than the entire banana industry. And so I went to my colleague prime ministers and I said, listen, this is incredibly important to our region, culture. And they said, now Suriname has the portfolio for culture amongst regional prime ministers. The Bahamas has the portfolio for tourism. But now we want you in the Bahamas to broaden your base without causing a conflict with Suriname. So we're going to change the portfolio for the Bahamas to be tourism and cultural industries. I say that only to give you an indication. I'm not even sure whether our current Prime Minister is aware of it or believes in it, but the point is that the work of Charles Carter was always pointed to being able to maximize the return to our country of people who were talented, who were gifted, and who needed to have some kind of connection with success, leading to the road for success. And Carter's life work was all about that. And I will never forget that for him, because when he came into politics in 1982, he brought it with him. Around the table, he would argue and represent these people who he did so much to help and who helped him become the person he was. And he never allowed the government to forget that we have this obligation to continue to evolve towards a greater understanding amongst Bahamians that we are Bahamians, and to help us really find out and discover and strengthen who we are as an important part of the process of governance in our country. Carter distinguished himself again, this tour de force, in so many ways that were uplifting and significant. He distinguished himself in public life, and he will always be remembered for someone who was impeccably honest, someone who always believed that he should treat everyone with dignity regardless of politics, and that everyone was entitled to a fair share of the Bahamas. And he really distinguished himself by placing party politics second to the national interest. And so, as the Member of Parliament for Holy Cross, I was a part of some of his campaigns and meeting some of his generals, and we were now contemporaries in public life. And Carter brought an excitement to representation, and the people who campaigned for him, I'll always remember them. They were, by name, by individuals, a part of a family network that he had created. He was really a force in Holy Cross for the time that he was there. I am sure he's well remembered by many of those who are still alive. And after politics, Charles Carter still became a major contributor. As God would have it, he was able to get a private license and continued with his broadcasting, Island FM, and continued to distinguish himself in the service to the Bahamian people. I was saying to Charles Carter's brother this morning that he always told me that he had an inventory of Bahamian music, an inventory of interviewing famous Bahamians that was second to none. And there is no doubt in my mind, when I heard about the Sandals organization purchasing the works of Bob Marley, that the government of the country must give careful consideration with the Carter family to protecting this cherished work, this enormous amount of work over the generations that he has put together, and to seriously consider purchasing it if the Carter family would sell it, and placing it in the hands of the University of the Bahamas. It's my way of thinking of how do you pass on to future generations of Bahamians this priceless work, set of works that he has done, and how do you protect it? And the best way to do so is to put it into your institution, your tertiary institution, University of the Bahamas, and to have that there pass on from generation to generation and become a teaching tool. Because Carter, not just whether it was a Young Bahamian show or as a master interviewer, I remember when I was a member of the board of directors of Broadcasting Corporation of the Bahamas. Milo Butler was the chairman, and we had to make a decision to send for further education prior to the introduction of television, a number of Bahamian broadcasters. And I remember when we selected Kelsey Johnson, we selected Ed Bethel, when we selected Charles Carter. And I remember the institutions they went to all for training. But they came back and they helped in the pioneering of Bahamian television. And Carter again distinguished himself as a master interviewer and someone who was just not interested in saying, listen to this music or listen to this artist, but in the process, using his interview as a tool for inspiring Bahamians, instilling pride in Bahamians, and educating Bahamians, not just in terms of the music they were hearing, but also in intellectual thought. It was a question of really, truly visiting upon those who were listening and those who were watching, something that became a part of their life and their educational experience. And so again, Carter was an incredible personality who had this tremendous impact. And I'll never forget him. I'll never forget him because when he retired, every time I needed some major personality to involve themselves in a national event, he accepted. he truly accepted. And therefore, for me, to my government, he was an incredible sort of reservoir of knowledge, a new font of knowledge and dependability. And this is what led us to making a recommendation to Her Majesty the Queen for a knighthood. And really, in summing it up, a knighthood that was so vitally important to a man who had done so much for the people of his country, in uplifting them and giving them a new feel of importance in being a major contributor to the strengthening of the ethos of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And I'm so sure that our country will miss this great service that he represented. And we sincerely hope, like everything else, that there will be others inspired by his work and effort who will take his place moving our country forward. May he rest in peace.
But, you know, it's hard for you to think that the average fellow who goes into Parliament today is a role model for anything except, you know, he's been able to be in the right place at the right time with the right ambition, and he's now a member of Parliament. And yes, having been that myself, I know that it is a great responsibility being a leader in a community. And you just hope that, you know, when people think of what you tried to do when you were there and the way you conducted yourself has left a good taste in their mouth. I was not a high flyer politician. I wasn't one of those who felt he had to be there or had to be anything. But I learned a lot about this country through the political process. I learned that a lot of things are possible.
The voice of Charles Carter, who for many years served the Bahamian people as a broadcaster and an educator. Mr. Carter will be long remembered in our broadcasting industry as a trailblazer. We extend our deep sympathies to his wife, Lady Muriel Carter, his sons, his children, grandchildren, and other family members. May his soul rest in peace. I'm Wendell Jones. Thank you for watching and listening to this tribute. Good evening, everyone.